Stand by. One to your number in front of the position. Hello, 3, coming to you. 3, coming to you. 3.
We're on 3.
What?
We're on 3.
Oh, yes. Music.
Riddle me that. The rest of y'all know where I'm lyrically at. Can't none of y'all mirror me back. Yeah, hear me rappers like A.K.A. rapping his prime. I'm young H.O., raps great for dead. Back to take over the globe, now break bread. I'm in Boeing Jets, Slow Express. Out the country, but the blueberries still connect. On the low, but the yacht got a triple deck. But when you young, what the fuck is that? Yep. Grand opening, grand closing. Goddamn your manhole, crack the can open again. Who you gonna find dope in a hand with no pen? Just draw inspiration. So you gonna see you can't replace him with cheap imitations. For this generation, encore. Do you want more? Cook and roll with the Brooklyn boys. So for one last time, I need y'all to roll. Now look what you made me do, look what I made for you. Knew if I paid my dues, how would they pay you? When you first come in the game, they try to play you. If I owe you, I blow you to smithereens. Got 7 tape one for your team, and I need you to remember one thing. I came, I saw, I conquered. The record sale, sold out concerts. So motherfucker, if you want this encore, I need you to scream till your lungs are sore. Hold up, are y'all out there? Are y'all out there? Come on now. Yeah, and see that's what I'm talking about.
Right? All I can say is that's a lot more funky than George Bush. But the whole idea here is not only is it just a kind of situation where you have people responding to a media environment where they feel a connection and then also have an irreverence for the control mechanisms. It's not a passive situation. As a matter of fact, the remix says, look, I heard that, I saw that, I want to make my own version. So it means that it's a participatory culture. You know, it's not one where you just press play, you know, like a previous generation or a couple generations ago. But it's something that we all grow up with now. I mean, we all probably have iPods, I'm sure, or something similar, flash drives and so on. But what that means is essentially that the album, as we knew it in the 20th century, is now the playlist. It's very rare that you like a full album. You probably like maybe 1, 2 tracks on it. You might download it from SoulSeek or Napster or Nutella, or for that matter, LimeWire. But at the end of the day, the culture of what that download means is essentially that the whole physical object of the record of the 20th century, of this kind of relationship of, you know, the record, it's gone. So as a DJ, what I'm looking at is digital media and film. My first film's coming out a little bit, so I've been going through a lot of archives and looking at these older films and seeing how people remix them. So my second book, after Rhythm Science, I have a DVD in the back that's going to have a lot of rare video clips and remixes and stuff like that. My first book, Rhythm Science, has a whole bunch of rare audio recordings of very renowned writers like James Joyce or Gertrude Stein mixed with like Wu-Tang Clan, you know, you know, stuff like that. But the whole idea is that it's about the mashup. The remix says that there's an irreverence for the normal boundaries between black, white, Asian, Latino, America, Brazil, India, Russia, China. It's a blur. So what everybody growing up in this kind of environment essentially responds to is not about whether it's New York, LA, West Coast, East Coast. That's very, very 20th century. I want to do the update on that and get people to think not only about the American theme of hip-hop or drum and bass and techno and all that, but how those things inspire creativity in the everyday world. So from the iPod playlist to Wikipedia, what you're seeing is this shift in individual production. Again, not necessarily mass culture, but mass customization. So behind me you have the cover of Scientific American from 1914. It's a very famous image done by Eddie and Jules Murray. He's one of my favorite photographers because he helped popularize this style of photography called stop motion photography. So you essentially have to imagine that the camera's shutter was moving so quick that it would be able to capture movement like, just small slivers. So essentially what you're seeing there is human motion broken into small fragments. So visually speaking, that's the equivalent of a visual sample. So what I want to do is show you a little sample, just a quick thing. Okay, so it's nothing. But basic idea is you were hearing tiny fragments of a sound cut up in the same way that you see this photograph here cutting up someone's motion. So stop motion photography becomes stop motion sound. How do you play between the two? That's what I'm going to be focusing on tonight. Behind me you have a gentleman by the name of John Cage. He actually taught at the school that this area is so famous for, and that's called the Black Mountain College. He was the first composer to make compositions for turntables, and in 1939 he had a really famous piece called Imaginary Landscape No. 1. And the audience was really pissed off when they saw this. Because what ended up happening, imagine like an audience like you guys come in, and there's no orchestra, or no DJ at that matter, no orchestra playing, and he just had a whole bunch of record players on stage playing different frequencies. And the audience was like, where's the band? And he's like, well, the frequencies. And so people wanted their money back, everybody was pissed off. And he's like, well, that's the composition. It's the records playing those frequencies, and when you hear them all playing at the same time, hey, it's art, right? The audience wasn't feeling it. But the whole idea at that time, 1939, to make a composition out of turntables was a radical step, because people back then were conditioned to see bands. They needed to see something live. They wanted to see you play or hear you sing. But for us, it's the opposite. We're used to actually pressing play on a record, and then maybe you go see the band. It's very rare that you do the opposite. As a matter of fact, most of our experiences of entertainment and culture are from recordings. So that turns the whole world upside down in terms of how normal human expression over the last several centuries works. Everybody's used to the live. You hear someone speak. Or like that Bush remix, you can edit how someone speaks. I think he actually sounded more coherent in the remix than in the original, but hey, So the imaginary landscape of the 20th century becomes the digital landscape of the 21st. Analog versus digital. The first composition for turntables in 1939, and here it is 2007. So for me, it's about data. And the whole pun there is not necessarily about analog versus digital, but about how information evolves in different media. So this is about a 5 gigabyte data file. Now, my first film's coming out, and we had to render it and do a whole series of stuff. I got the rights to a very infamous film by D.W. Griffiths called Birth of a Nation. And I don't know if anybody out there knows, it's a very infamous Ku Klux Klan film. And I can assure everybody out there, I'm not a Klan member, But the funny thing is, a lot of the early DJs, people like Grandmaster Flash, Grand Wizard Theodore, they would call themselves that, And I know these guys, and I would say, Flash, by the way, did you know your title's also a Klan title? And he's like, what? I was like, yeah, it's a Klan title. You got Grand Masters, Grand Wizards, Grand Dragons. So the motto there is that, it's one thing to be a Grand Master in Kentucky, and another to be a Grand Master in, like, the South Bronx, But they have the same name, and that's the mashup. So the pun there is that not only is the imaginary landscape of vinyl and CDs, MP3s, Windows Media applications, all of that is about how information moves between structures. So the pun there is that the remix is translation, It means that you are translating what your imagination has done to someone else's work. Is it appropriation? Is it quotation? There's an uneasy tension there between art and artifact. Again, going back to that production model, again, the 20th century model, the factory floor there, you know, you can see all the guys working. There was a gentleman by the name of Frederick Winslow Taylor who had this really wild idea of timing everyone's motions. So he called that the clockwork economy. And essentially, he was one of the first people to measure human motion and create a sense of production around it. So how many, you know, people does it take to change a light bulb? Well, he would break it down, measure every turn of the screw, how many steps it would take to go up the ladder, and break each of those into its component parts. So the idea was that all human production models had component elements. So the same thing happens with sampling. You're essentially taking one Lego block and applying it over another. I'm going to just play a collage, just a random thing. Here we go.
Singing now. Whatever going on up there. If you don't, I'm going to call the cops.